Good hello, welcome to Creative Journal, my personal creative journal, where this time I crashed and burned quite badly. This was made for an animated competition that's held locally here, but also around the world, called Loop-de-Loop. It's a bi-monthly animation competition where you make an animated loop according to the theme. And, well, what went wrong? Well, it simply was rejected. It didn't make it into the final screening, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes. But why not throw together a time lapse of it anyway and talk about, what I attempted to do when maybe where something fell a bit flat. That's the whole point of Creative Journal, really, is it shows the successes, but even more importantly, it shows the things that, so the premise or the theme this time was breakfast. The idea I came up with was in the foreground there's a box of cereals, got a smiley face on it. In the background we see the silhouette of like a businessman stumble in and is looking all frantic and out of time. He looks down at his watch, up at the cereal box, down at his watch, up again, shakes his head, no he doesn't have time, and off he goes. So that's what I tried to do. This opening section here is all the roughing, as you can see, blotted out a very quick background, or foreground in this case, and the animation is all done with form rather than outline. So I used a thick brush to try and figure out the shapes, just trying to get some anatomy, and it was animated fairly straight ahead. 3 frames only to differentiate between when the hand is raised and when that was lowered. That was probably my favorite bit in the end, just the gesture of looking up and down. Once all that was done, what I wanted to experiment with this time around was the texture strokes. I'd never used that before in Toon Boom. It seems to be quite a powerful feature that you can have things with wiffly or soft edges, but because it is a stroke and not a fill, when it comes to using the paint bucket on such strokes, it will still go right up to the middle. It'll go over the edges. It won't leave that kind of gross outline that Photoshop textures can often leave. The other thing I wanted to practice with was in a lot of short films and things, I see people like to do the sort of wobbly line crayon effect, like everything's been redrawn every frame. I've never really done that before either, so I thought I'd give it a crack, and I guess realized it's not really my thing, because it ended up taking probably more time than if I had just done it normally. To create the hand-drawn organic look artificially felt artificial. It didn't work. Meanwhile, I've also put in some bitmap layers here for the front face of the cereal box and the milk, because why not? Could get a little bit more texture in there. And this whole project was to just experiment with features that I very rarely, if ever, use. So each element, the cereal box, milk, the table, the foreground and the background, all of their outlines are different colors. That's also something I don't typically do. I'll usually just use black outlines because it's quick and easy and it's all latched to one thing. After filling in all the colors, the front of the cereal box and the milk you can see are red. That is so that they can be sampled out later using a color override that is only going to reveal the red. Therefore, the red can be used as a mask, which goes through that cutter and reveals the bitmap texture through it. So after that, I'm now inking the guy, which is a relatively straightforward process. It was on average time consuming. Like, it took a while, but it didn't take longer than I would have expected it to. It is just a regular black brush, actually, not using strokes for this because it is just one big block, so it didn't matter if it was all in fills. I think one of the things that probably really let this project down was a clash of style. Trying to go for the weird brightly colored crayon-y stuff which was all round, and then having the character be silhouetted but also quite jagged, sharp, straight angles in his line art. I guess you could say I was trying to be artistic, and that the environment and the character were 2 different styles, and that's all contrasty, and no, I just wasn't really thinking, to be honest. I also had some compositing effects put in. You can see the character with the background behind him, the light kind of bleeds, it washes over the edges of him. That's an effect that I built in my own time. As an auto light wrap thing. It takes every layer that is below the character and applies the light to whatever it is above, working its way up the chain. That, I think, looked quite nice. what I think doesn't look very nice is just the choice of palette in general. I couldn't really get away from something more, I guess, realistic. I sort of just defaulted to murky browns and greens. What was I thinking? I should have gone for something that was deliberately bright and punchy, but that's the way it goes. So the layer hierarchy in the end was the background was out in the hallway, then there was the guy, then there was the room, then there was the light coming in through the window, then the table, then the box. Fortunately, while inking, I was able to fix up some things I wasn't too pleased with in the rough. Steps in the walk were able to get a bit more smoothed out, and I just went back in with a white brush in order to put in the shirt collar and where the watch was. That's the best way to differentiate the angle. I'd have light change from daytime to nighttime. That was done by creating clone palettes. Each of the clone palettes had a bit of a tint, one with a bit more of a blue effect, one with a bit more of an orange effect, and then they would simply animate their transparency between one another. They have a tint system. When you right click on the palette, when you go to the drop down menu in the very top left of the palette, you can open up what is called the tint panel. That gives you a whole bunch of hue saturation sliders that will affect an entire palette permanently. However, their identification number is still linked to the original. So all you have to do then is select the different palettes, and the whole scene or whatever is attached to the original will auto update itself. This is very handy for changing environments like this, but also for reusing any sort of character palette. You say using a character across a whole number of different scenes. Now I'm putting in an effect because it needs to loop. It needs to go from day to night to day again. To pull that off, I wanted to have light streaming in through the window and somehow have it morph across the bottom. That's something I've never really done before either, using the morph tools, the shape tween tools rather. Eventually managed to figure it out by having individual lines which morphed across and then filled it all in after converting it from a morphed sequence into regular frames again. All of this was created with Toon Boom Harmony Premium because, I of course like having access to the node network. I knew that I wanted to have some effects with it and experiment with many of the tools which I've known about in this program but never had the opportunity to use in a project before. The advantage was, of course, I learnt a lot about this program which I never have had before, but the disadvantage was I'm certainly not experienced with a lot of those features. I could explain how they work, but in order to use them effectively was something to overcome. I think that's everything I have to say about this project. Thanks for coming along. I hope you got something out of this. What do you think fell flat? What do you think didn't work very well with this? This is probably a perfect opportunity for me to ask for my audience to give me some constructive criticism on how I can improve in the future. Here is the final animation. What do you think? Thanks again for your company, have some fun, and I'll see you in the next one.